It came from the video aisle. This is a deep dive, folks, and I mean Mariana Trench style deep dive into the entire history of Full Moon Features. It's written by an author team of Dave J., William Wilson, and Torsten Dewey, and all three of them take various aspects of Full Moon's history and sort of expand upon it in essentially microscopic detail. Now, this thing is almost 500 pages long. It covers everything Full Moon, from the late 80s, sort of like the creation, formation, all the way through around 2017, which is when this book came out, I believe. Now, we're not talking just the Puppet Master films and subspecies and notable stuff like that, although there are giant sections dedicated to all those movies. But we're talking, hey, let's get into Charles Band's Moonbeam children's line with Prehysteria and stuff like that. And hey, let's talk about the softcore erotica Surrender Cinema line, those kind of things. Now, I would argue that this book actually puts just as much focus on the small, nearly unknown films as it does big stuff like Puppet Master. And I was absolutely 100% totally here for it. The authors sort of go through everything in chronological order. They talk about the Paramount years, how the Full Moon Features got flush with all this money in the early 90s and how it all collapsed through horrible spending. They have, all the different areas after that where Band was basically selling everything other than his body to keep his company afloat. But whereas Band's own autobiography glossed over a lot of the post-2000 era stuff, this book deep dives into all of it. You want to know about the making of Bleed with Debbie Rochon? That's here. You want to know about Killjoy? It's here. The book is also littered with interviews from dozens of individuals who worked at Full Moon over nearly 2 decades. So you got cinematographers, producers, editors, you name it. Everyone has a perspective on the highs and lows of Full Moon. And if you grew up loving these movies like I did, it's just pure joy to read this. Another great thing is just about every page has some sort of color photo, whether it's early production art or movie posters or behind the scenes photographs. You really get engaged with the films as you go through this and sort of grow to have a great appreciation of them. There's also so many films I didn't realize were Full Moon because they were shot under some different sub-label or whatever that Charles Band just created willy-nilly because he didn't feel like the content of the films and the production value would necessarily live up to Full Moon, like that name. But it made me excited to go back and rewatch a lot of these with that new contextualization. Now, if there are any downsides to this book, it would be that the book opens with very little said about the collapse of Empire Pictures, which is what led to the creation of Full Moon in the first place. They do touch on it briefly, but an entire chapter dedicated to what really happened there would have been great. Charles Band does talk about it in his book, Confessions of a Puppet Master, which is available, that review here on Outpost Unknown. I'll link it in the description below. But I would have loved to read the stories about what happened from a non-Charles Band perspective. The authors mentioned multiple times that Full Moon has an official numbered list of its films, but that was not included in the book. It would have been great to be able to go through all of those and see them in chronological order, and it should have been added to the end of the book in like an appendix or something like that, the entire chronological order of every Full Moon film. But ultimately, this is a fantastic book. If you have any interest in Full Moon at all, it's a must read. Now, if you didn't grow up watching these movies, I can see this being a tough read only because so much of it is deep diving into really obscure movies within Charles Band's filmography. And if you haven't seen those movies, you might not have any interest in this stuff. But I'd still say there's value there because they talk so much about the making of the movies themselves. So even if you haven't watched these movies before, if you have any interest in learning about how movies are made, especially low budget movies, then this is really excellent, guys. It's a really cool book to read through. So if you've seen them, it's just icing on the cake. This is great. I feel like I know everything there is to know about Full Moon Features, and what I didn't get from this book, I got through Confessions of a Puppet Master, Charles Band's book. These are perfect companion pieces to one another. Read this first, then read Confessions of a Puppet Master. You will have your fill of everything Full Moon. So this is a great book. My rating, A+.